thank you for joining us in this Scientia meeting, the first Scientia meeting of 2020-2021. We are glad to welcome you all for this talk on how may biodiversity web portals
thank you for joining us
help
in
to
this
reconnect
Scientia meeting.
Sorry. So how may biodiversity web portals help to reconnect education with nature? With researcher Rosalina Gabriel from the Azorean Biodiversity Group. Our coordinator of C3C, Cristina Maguas, is unfortunately not able to join us right now, but she has asked me to give you just a few words to welcome you all. We are very glad to have you here. And please keep following our events. And I will now give the words to Professor Paulo Borges, who will present our speaker today, Rosalina Gabriel, Professor Rosalina Gabriel. And he's the coordinator of the Azorean Biodiversity Group. So please, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome to everyone. I'm also very happy that we can start this season with talks that now will change for Zoom and other kind of platforms. In a way, this will be a challenging time, but I hope that also we can reach other kind of people, audiences outside C3C, and get also more visibility to our center. I will present then Professor Rosalina Gabriel, that probably many of you know by her expertise in biophyte ecology and conservation. However, she has also a long-standing commitment in studying interactions between nature and people, and environmental education. And the topic she will today talk with us is related with a very relevant topic, that is the connection between people and nature, and in particular related with biodiversity portals. This is a very important topic because, as she will explain, we are in a time where we need more and more people connect with nature to support all the investments that European community with the Green Deal wants to put money, a lot of money in biodiversity conservation with environmental topics, and there is a need that people understand the value of nature. Therefore, this talk is in a proper moment. The contents of the talk was recently accepted in the Journal Environmental Conservation, and I hope everyone can be happy with learning more about this important topic. I give the floor to Rosalina.
Thank you very much. I thank C3C for inviting me to present part of a collaborative work. And I'm very happy to start 2020-2021 season in Scientia. And unlike my first presentation in these meetings, today I'm talking about my second best love, which is environmental education. And thank you, Marta and Paulo, for introducing me. And now I will start sharing my screen, and we can then proceed from here. So I hope you are already seeing the first slide, which has the title of this talk, but more importantly, it has the colleagues that have cooperated with us and have for many years now work within environmental education. So Ana Moura Rouge, our postdoc Ana Luisa Picanso, our colleague Isabel Amorim, and another colleague working both in MITI, Madeira, Madeira Institute of Technology, and the University of Edinburgh. So I have a small summary here, and the main purpose of this talk is to think a little bit about reconnection of people and nature. Connection and reconnection of people and nature. So this is the main aim of this talk, to make us think about how do we connect to nature, how are our children connecting to nature, how are our children's connecting to nature, and what can we do to foster this. So I will not even start with introducing biodiversity, because we are in this forum. I will start right away introducing biodiversity loss and the communication of biodiversity loss. I will talk a little bit about the extinction of experience, a little bit about technological nature, and a little bit about education. What can formal education do for us in connecting people with nature? And for that, I will use a very specific topic, which is biodiversity web portals. And so this is the approach for this talk. Okay. So biodiversity loss is very well documented, both in a global level and in a more regional and local level. It's very well documented for plants and fungi and every organisms. And these are just things that I gathered from my desktop because they are very recent. So it's really very impressive how we are losing and acknowledging the loss of these species. And of course, as biologists, we cannot ignore the role that it will have on nature and natural processes. It will probably change many things that we cannot appreciate fully today. But it also has impact on the way people look at nature. So several authors have been talking about the extinction of experience. Extinction of experience because the plants are not there, the bees are not there, the fungi are not there, the bryophytes are not there. So there is nothing to relate to nature. Okay? So Kevin Gaston and Soga wrote earlier this year that it is possible to think about an experience without virtually direct nature interactions. And their examples were confinement in prisons, confinement in mental hospitals, submarines, and some forms of social withdrawal and depression. But they also, and I believe they wrote this in 2019 and it was published in 2020, they also mention people that are housebound or bedbound. And in 2020, we have been very housebound. And we will probably have to continue to some extent. And this has impacts on the way we know, appreciate, and experience nature. So this is something that is connected with biodiversity loss, and it's also important to keep in mind when we do our role as teachers and educators in general. Okay? So this loss of extinction or extinction of experience is not a new phenomenon. This is something that has been described for some years now. And I remember this paper from 2002 when Pokemon was the big rage, and it's my kids, my children were about 10 years old or something when Pokemon was in place, and they knew a lot about it, and they were not the only ones, because this study this is now a classic study from Balfour and colleagues. They interviewed a number of British children from 5 to 13, so the primary level of education in Great Britain, and they came with these astonishing results. Young children, by the age of 8 years old, they could name about 80% of the first original 150 Pokemon, these synthetic species. And they knew a lot about them, if they were electrical, if they were water type, if they were plant type, so if they were bug type. So they knew lots of different things. What were their weaknesses? What were their strengths? But by the age of 13, so before leaving the primary education, they could name less than 50% of common wildlife types, like hares, or I will not say rabbits, probably rabbits were safe. But even a hare or a chestnut, they were not recognized by half of these British children. So this is not exactly happening in the last year due to COVID. This is happening for a long time now. So this loss of knowledge has been reported to be connected from different people doing different research with a withdrawal from the natural world. So this isolation from the natural world. And it's important to see that as far as 1994, people were already written books about this, like, for instance, Why Children Need Wild Places. So this is a very interesting book. And I wonder how many of us had the privilege to go walking on a little stream without our parents very, very near us. And how many of our children had that opportunity? Yes. We should think a little bit about this. And yeah. So the separation from nature is concurrent with something else that is also occurring in our society, which is the importance, the growing importance of technology. And we are all connected now due to technology. So I'm not complaining, but we are stating facts here. So there is, as far as nature and rural areas decrease and people get more urbanized, it also increases room for technological nature. And technological nature was reported to be related to the technologies that mediate, augment, or simulate natural world. We all have spent some time looking at children and youth playing their games in a computer. And most of them, they have very exotic environments, green, luxurious, butterflies flying, lots of different beings which we cannot recognize, but they are alive inside that platform, inside that paradigm. And that's where many hours are spent by our children. So this is a bit of technological nature. So it comes that these authors, Perkins and Zaradik, they have made this very interesting study back in 2006. So for the last 50 years, up to 1988, the visitation of natural parks in the United States had steadily increased. But from 1988 forward, it decreased, and they make this is published in the Journal of Environmental Management. So they were addressing managers, and they make economical models to explain why this occurred, and why. The why is here in the title. So people, they were not going to national parks, but they were watching movies, playing video games, using the internet, and the oil prices had risen. So less money to travel, or shorter travels, explained a little bit, helped to explain why people didn't visit the national parks as they used to. So they are very worried about this. These authors, they claim that if we are leaving the frame of biophilia, which was proposed by Wilson in 1984, which is the belief of Wilson, that Edward Wilson, that we as human beings are programmed, so to speak, to care for nature, to enjoy nature, to need nature as much as we are programmed to take care of the young of a society. And Wilson was actually quite optimistic, saying that this is a trend that is evolutionary, and no way we are going to lose it over 20 years of withdrawing from more wild nature, or 2000 even. But these authors are very worried, and they seem to uncover a trend to focus on sedentary activities involving electronic media, and they call this videophilia. So this was what we had in mind when we thought about our study. So human beings still have the ability to learn and care for nature, and many people do actually, but opportunities for experience nature are increasingly mediated by technology. And what can our formal education do to influence the content, direction, strength of people's nature-related values? So I've been teaching here at University of the Azores for the past 30 years. So many students have passed through my classes. And it's very interesting that in the beginning of my teaching, students knew more about evolutionary processes and knew less about biochemical and genetic processes. So there is a trend now that, because I teach cell biology and plant biology, I can see that they are much better in cell biology because they have more foundations coming from school than in actually biodiversity issues and taxonomic issues. And although the cell biologist in me thinks it's very good that they know something about all these processes that are occurring within the cell, the ecologist cries a little because something that can give you so much pleasure over the years to go through a field and to know some species, to appreciate if they are increasing or decreasing. And this is so important, I think, in so many levels for all of us that like to go to nature, that I think it's a pity that youth is not learning much about this anymore. Well, so anyway, this is our first and big question. How can formal education help us within this problem? So these were the research questions that we have organized. First of all, are teachers familiar with information and communication technology? Because if teachers are not familiar or do not use these tools, it would be difficult to use them as an attempt to reconnect kids and nature. So, then what do teachers know and perceive as biodiversity? And we think that biodiversity is a concept far more wide than to be left alone to nature teachers or to biology and geology teachers. So all the teachers actually can and will at some point talk about nature, be it in poetry or narrative or geography. So many. So we decided that this was important for all the teachers. And to what extent are biodiversity web portals used in teaching and in preparing lessons? And so now I will present a little bit of the study, the participants and the study area, and then I will try to answer those questions as our data allowed us. So we made this work in the archipelago of the Azores. The archipelago is almost 1,600 meters from Lisbon, and they are in the same parallel. And the islands themselves are quite far apart from each other. Here we can see from Santa Maria to Flores, it's more than 600 kilometers. So in beeline, they are far away. And there are roughly 3 groups of islands. About 250,000 inhabitants, and less than half have a secondary education or more. So the archipelago is also known for its important biodiversity and endemism. Our participants were 243 public school teachers, so 6% of all the teachers in the Azores in 2019. Most of them were female, as it corresponds to what we have in reality. They had an average work experience of 22 years, give or take 7 years. And we got them answering our questionnaire from 8 of the 9 Azorean Islands. Okay? So what we had this questionnaire, online survey. It was approved by the Ethics Committee, and our cooperators, the Direção Regional da Educação, sent the link for the teachers, so it was official, and they knew it was not spam. The questionnaire was organized in 4 parts. The first part, and the one that I am going to refer the most today, is a free association test. Free associations are the associations that we make when we think about something. So, say for instance, mother. If I say the word mother or mãe for the Portuguese, immediately something comes to our mind. This is not an evaluation test. This is a test created by Carl Jung to access the subconscious of people. So this has been useful in many situations, and particularly within the social representations theory later proposed by Serge Moscovici, this sociologist, Romanian sociologist working in France, and Abric. They organized a little bit the information that comes, they helped us to organize the information that comes from this free association. So we had 3 stimulus words coming at different parts of the questionnaire: internet, biodiversity, and biodiversity web portals. We had also other questions about the skills and preferences of the teachers when using these educational resources. And we had nature exposure scale to, I will not talk much about this because, well, I don't have the time. But the nature, a scale is a way that people try to capture what other people think about something. So we wanted to know how much exposure did teachers have to nature in the Azores. And we use this so-called scale, which is formed by 4 items, which are sentences. Once again, non-evaluative. It's not the purpose, but just sentences that people have the opportunity to say. For instance, I notice nature a lot, or I do not. So they answered from 1 to 5 in a scale, in a Likert scale. And also we had 9 socio-demographic questions. The reason to put this nature exposure scale in the Azores is because we live in such a rich and biodiverse place that it could be different from teachers and people living in more urbanized and less rich environments. So this was something that we thought could inform a bit the answers of the teacher. So the first thing that we did was to analyze our evocations. So the words that came when we asked teachers to tell us what they thought about biodiversity. What were the first thoughts that they have when they heard the word biodiversity? So there are 3 kinds of methods that we have used. One of them is just the analysis of the semantic field, counting words, knowing how many different words, how many words in total, and this index of richness, which is related to the amplitude and the fluidity of the respondents. Then we did something which involves also counting, and involves counting the number of times that a word comes. And this is called a prototypical analysis. And since it's not very well known, I will explain it a little bit. In the end, we have 4 cells. In the upper part of the cells, we have those words which are here in dark that appeared a lot above a threshold, and in the lower part, in these 2 bottom cells, they are the words that have appeared less, much less, so lower frequency. On the right hand part, we have the quadrants, the cells that have the words that were evoked later. For instance, imagine that I was thinking about my mother and my first word would be love. And perhaps in the end, I could say something after saying 7 or 8 words. I could say something like brown eyes. So obviously, brown eyes is something that I associate with my mother, but it was not the central upfront thing that I wanted to come up with. So this prototypical analysis is just an elaboration, of counting. It will give us the words that are more common and that they come first to our mind when we present a stimulus world, and separate them from those who come first, which is this contrast zone, which is here in green, first, but not many. This is a very important field because it's sometimes revolutions start here. So when we have a group of people that thinks a very different thing from what everybody is thinking, even if they are not many, and here they are the words that they are not frequent, they are not evoked very promptly. Okay, so after this, we came up with some similarity analysis, that will go and make with the will give us the connection between the words and results in a tree, a maximum likelihood tree, and includes the words that are connected with a particular word with more occurrence. So for instance, here it was aged, and these were the actions that were more or less connected with them. This is very interesting because it gives us the frequencies of occurrence or co-occurrence between groups. So it will allow us to elaborate a little more of the list of species that we have after the analysis of the prototypical analysis. So first, the analysis of the semantic field. And these are the first thing that we can see, that all the participants answered the stimulus word internet and biodiversity, but less than half have characterized biodiversity portals. So this says something already. Also, something interesting is that the average word per person was higher in internet than biodiversity. So what we get from here, also the fluidity, etc. What we get from here is that the teachers were more comfortable with the term internet. They knew more things and they shared more things with us. And even less with biodiversity and even less with Biodiversity Web Portals. So going to the prototypical analysis that I have just explained, for internet. So what do teachers think about internet? So the central core, which is these words that are very frequent, you see 110 people came up with the word information, and this came up in the first or second mean evocation order. So the evocation order was very prompt, and here we have a word that is very present in the minds of the teachers, information. So the central core, which is here in yellow, represents about half of all evocations, and it comes to kind of a global information database that people go and search and work and connect to. So this is a kind of global information system that we have access to. These words, which are called the first periphery, give us a little bit more information about the ease of use, so access, share, and the importance of being a tool. So these were the most evoked terms. And here, see, here the frequencies, even if it is 14, it's more than 10. That was our threshold, I think. No, it was 14, our threshold. Because here we have, in the bottom part, the words that were not evoked by so many people, but still were evoked quite promptly. And we have something that appears here like danger and technology and know-how and connection. So it's a bit more associated with the risks and the technological aspects of the internet. The similarity analysis from these three groups shows that there are three main stars or groupings, one around information, one around search, and one around knowledge. Information is also connected with this small branch that qualifies the ease of the experience. So if it's speedy, easy, and convenient, and it's related to internet, to information, sorry. So here we confirm what we already knew from the prototypical analysis, that most of the people think the size of each circle is the number of people that have said the word. Most of the people think of internet think about information. But this information is connected, of course, to search, to what we do in the internet. And here we have, it's very interesting for search because we have here several platforms from email, Instagram, social network. All of these come Google, come here, Facebook, YouTube, etc. All of these come in yellow and are connected with search. And then we have knowledge, which is linked with the way we see and experience the world, kind of scientific or ludic or virtual even. So it's quite interesting. So entertainment, virtual, all of these worlds gravitate towards this knowledge. So this is internet. Teachers are very comfortable with the internet, and the other questions, the answers to the other questions tell us that they use different platforms, both in everyday life and in their work. What about biodiversity? So let's see. For biodiversity, we have a central core, very descriptive, and for those that know the definition of the Convention for Biodiversity, Biological Diversity from 1992, we know that there are 3 levels in this definition. So the genetic, molecular, etc. level, the species level, and the ecosystems level. So let's see how these teachers are doing regarding this formal definition of biodiversity. Well, diversity, flora, fauna, species, life, they are quite into the species level of description of biodiversity. And they bring something else. They bring something which is not in this definition, which is these words risk, sustainability, life, which is kind of important because it shows us that they are worried with this equilibrium, which is then showed here also in the first periphery, ecosystems, planet equilibrium. So there is something that is very connected to the species, fauna and flora, but there is something also about the risk, the conservation of all this heritage. But the conservation of heritage will be more evident later. So the contrast zone is very interesting. It's a little bit more regional, let's say, because it calls here for Azores, endemics. So this is a more regional trend, which is very good because these are people that are teaching here in the archipelago. And then we have also something a little bit more of the scientific domain. So it's something for the biology, something for the sciences. And as a note, and former ornithologist, I must say that birds was the only taxonomic class that was mentioned. It's not the most, well, it's one of the most interesting and charismatic, certainly. So the similarity analysis comes and confirms our previous understanding, which is this diversity is connected to the ecosystems, to the species, and to the sustainability of the future. So it's very important that this link here, growing from diversity, is telling us, confirming what we suspected from the first analysis. So this nature cluster, it's more related to the conservation of natural heritage. And finally, we have another cluster around flora and fauna that are focused on the elements that are the context of this flora and fauna, like the sea, the islands, and also related to preservation and environment. Strangely enough, these are not connected back to ecosystems. So this was a different trend that was in mind of these people. So teachers showed an incomplete knowledge of all dimensions and history of the term biodiversity, focusing mostly on species and less on other dimensions. However, their will to protect this natural heritage is striking and different from what other people have found. I'm sorry, I need to check the time. Yes, as I suspected, it's very late. So we have here the biodiversity portal, the prototypical analysis of biodiversity portal. We have much fewer words, and they all revolve around the most generic content you can possibly imagine: information, environment, biodiversity, knowledge. I mean, you could say that from all the biodiversity portals in the world. So the similarity analysis confirms that these are the thoughts of our teachers, and that biodiversity is connected here also to Azores, endemism, another bird, the Azorean bullfinch priolo is here. So you see how rich were the other trees compared to this one, and how sparse this one is. So obviously biodiversity portals were not the thing that were most important for them. About 2/3 of the teachers use portals to prepare classes, but only 6 of the 82 portals were related to biodiversity, and only half, less than half of the teachers characterized these biodiversity portals. Besides, there are significant absences in these evocations because they do not refer to classes, to teaching, to duties, to youth, to children. So these biodiversity portals are not very well adjusted for teachers to use, or they don't use them, okay? Why? Why could that be? So we made a Google Scholar search about 2 or 3 portals, and I included these SBIF. And when we go to Google Scholar, I went yesterday, so these are yesterday numbers. But when we use the term SBIF in Google Scholar, we have 27,100 records. But when we include the word teaching, we have almost 5% of the records. So either teachers are not using them or researchers are not doing research about the use of portals. And something very similar with the Atlas of Living Australia, and something very similar with the most generic term, biodiversity portal. So little is known about these experiences of teachers as internet users and what they think about all this wealth of biodiversity knowledge that is already online. And I like to highlight here Biodiversity for All, Naturdata, the Biodiversity Learning Platform, etc. So studies on the impact on teaching and learning are scarce. And I think this is something very interesting. We can do something about this. Besides, most of the literature that we have surveyed presents biodiversity as an entity that should be taught involving active participation. So this technological nature is not very well received. However, the importance of technology is growing, and we believe that it should not be discarded per se. We should see what is the relationship between this technological nature versus real nature, and make some research about this and understand a little bit more what is happening with the extinction of experience. So if extinction of experience is already occurring, and for instance, I will come again to Gaston, he typified this loss of experience in 8 categories. some related to the time where your lack of experience was happened either in childhood or during lifetime. If the concept of nature is narrow, they use the term narrow, but I think a better term would be strict, because here they are talking about wild nature, while in this category, they are talking about the presence of living organisms, such as the silk moth, or a cat, or a dog, or a fish, or something. So this is more broad, nature understood much more broadly. And then this type of association, if it's interaction that they define as sensorial, or if it's really an experience where people are engaged in nature. So with this, we have 8 types, and now we have a framework that we can test in further studies. So we are in a position that a new realm has emerged between teaching young people, creating new pedagogical opportunities, and taking advantage of digital information and communication technologies. Even more because they are very popular amongst the new generations and the not so new generations, if we go truthfully about it. So we really need to evaluate their impacts on teachers and youth. And almost finishing, we believe that biodiversity web portals that are considered sound for many scientific purposes, and they are being used in many scientific research concerning the richness of species, the declining of species, etc., could be used for teaching. They are free. They are online free. They are easily accessible both to teachers and to students. And they are updated and accurate. So our data really reveals that not many teachers use biodiversity portals. And those who use them are especially looking for pictures and some audiovisual content. There is so much more that biodiversity portals could do for a teacher and a student. So I believe that the main message, because I'm talking more to biodiversity portal managers, should therefore create, promote pedagogical resources so that teachers can access all the wealth of information that is in these sites, and help to fill the gap between a person that is inside a school room or inside his own room nowadays and nature outside. There is all sorts of nature that we can explore, but it's easier if we know something about the local biodiversity. And biodiversity portals are generally a good way to start. Thank you. So we are very thankful to our teachers that spend the time answering this questionnaire. And we also want to thank Paulo for very useful insights, and Sandra Silva that helped us in the Direção Regional de Educação dos Açores. And also we would like to acknowledge our financial supporters, Portuguese funds, and FEDER and Azorean public funds. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professora Rosalina, for this very interesting talk. I talk by myself, but I think I will talk by those who are attending here. I learned a lot with this. So this is very, very interesting, and I will look for the papers because I want to read more about it. Okay. So now we are here looking at some of the questions that were already left here in the YouTube chat. So perhaps now we can interrupt the sharing of the screen so people can see you better. Thank you. So we have already, I will resume in 2 main questions. So they are here in Portuguese. I will translate them to English just to make them more accessible. So we have two main questions by Professor Maria Amélia, which highlights the importance of this research area. And she asks, one, if you intend to extend this study to continental Portugal. And two, she asks, many times professors don't talk or don't address biodiversity because they don't know and they are afraid to show that they don't know. And so Professor Maria Amélia asks if you felt that in this study.
Thank you very much, Professor. So nice that you are here listening to me. It makes me go a while in time. Oh well. At the moment, we do not have any plans to extend the study to the continental Portugal or Madeira, but we asked for permission to repeat it in the Azores because 1 year after COVID, I'm sure the teachers will be much more knowledge about it. The survey is not very long, so perhaps it could be interesting to have a different sample and to see what teachers are doing in other parts of our country. So it's a good idea. And the second one is about this shame that teachers sometimes may feel. I don't know, shame. Perhaps it's a very strong word, but a bit of embarrassment. It's true that as teachers we are the kings and queens in our classes, and we do not confront, like for instance, doctors or nurses that always have a group to make a decision. I think this is something that we should really reflect a little bit about this, but it was not very obvious in our questionnaire because the instrument that we used was particularly non-evaluative. So it just asked for the words that came to mind. So these are the words that came to mind. There were 6 places for people to write, and some of the teachers only wrote, for instance, 2 words, others wrote 3 words, but this, I think, was not seen as particularly embarrassing. So I think it's a good way to get this information, because even with these words and without the teachers having to compose full sentences, they are giving us a lot of information that we can think about.
Thank you. Thank you. I will check here. We have several comments here on the YouTube chat. Afterwards, I invite you. You can also check here the chat. Many people are congratulating you for the talk. And for those of you,
nice.
for those of you who are asking here in the chat if the presentation will be available afterwards, it will. So the video will be here on our YouTube channel, and you can check it again.
And I will include all the references, because I do not have the list. I do not have a slide with the list of references, but I will include it so everybody can go and check the references.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. That will be very, very useful. So I will now, I'm checking here the comments, and now I will highlight just 2 comments just to see if you want to add some information. We have another comment by Professor Maria Amélia. She asks if isn't it important to connect all the formal study with the non-formal study? And we have a comment also by Ursula Bravo, who says that she thinks that contemporary arts and interdisciplinarity can also help us to establish this connection. And okay, yeah. And many people also congratulating you and highlighting the importance of researchers and teachers waking up regarding biodiversity communication.
So first, I will address Ursula's notes on the importance of interdisciplinarity and arts, and definitely I agree with this. I agree with this, and um, I have seen a lot of parallels in children and youth trying to compose a poem, trying to paint a plant or a landscape. Even if the result is not something, there is something that is very important for education and for nature education, because you are looking with extra care, or as Ursula would say, you are listening with extra care, and you are smelling the air. You are doing it with your whole body. And this is what Gaston and Soga tell us about these engaging experiences. This is what they call experience and not just interaction. Okay, so all these fields are important, and I think that's why we included everybody: arts professors, physical education professors. Every domain is important in preserving our future biodiversity. Um, so but it's not easy. Sometimes it is not so easy. I'm afraid I forgot the question of Professora Amelia.
No problem, no problem. I will go back to her comment. She highlights or asks, wouldn't be important to connect all the formal study with the non-formal study?
Yes, definitely, very important. We are starting this project, this FCT project, about biological literacy in the Azores. So it's kind of a small scope. And we are focusing on literacy, so we are focusing on formal education. At other experiences that we have, for instance, with a different project that was led by Paulo Borges and Isabella Morim, we tried to to get people to know about insects, endemic insects, and we used the streets of Angra do Heroísmo to put canvas of 3 meters by 4 meters, so really large canvas, of small bugs with less than 1 centimeter long. And this was our way, and we also evaluated it, and it's also published. This was our way to take this information from our research centers and put it literally on the streets. So a lot of people looked at it, and about half of the people that we interviewed thought they were ugly, but interesting. Almost everybody thought they were interesting. So ugly, but interesting. So this is the caveat. So definitely, yes. So much to do. There's so much to do.
Yeah, so many questions ahead, and many lines of research that come with this study, right?
Yeah.
So just to wrap up the session, I'm looking here at the comments, many people giving you congratulations. I recognize here some of the names that I think are from your Azorean Biodiversity Group and from our research center, C3C. So Ana Morajo, who congratulates, and he's co-author of this work, I think, and Ana Picanso. And now I will come back to 2 final comments and questions, and then wrap up this Encontro Scientia. So the first comment I will address is by Sonia Margarida. She comments that it would be great that formal educators would use these tools, but they seem to be a little burdened, so overburdened, sobrecarregados in Portuguese. But she sees these biodiversity portals as an opportunity to explore new activities from environmental centers. So this is one comment. And then I go to the second question, comment, and final one for today, which is by Tiago Voga. he says that the Pokemon's reference was really interesting. There was no professor needed in that context, and he has never used it, but guesses that there are challenges and rewards. Anyone knows any nature portal that uses the same approach of a game?
Okay. So thank you very much. I will answer Sonia first. Yes, teachers are definitely overburdened, definitely. There is so much to do, but the good thing about the reason why I'm optimistic about the use of biodiversity portals is that teachers already use many portals. From their count, we counted 82 different portals. Some are related to the language, some are related to law, some are related to dictionaries, to interchanging teachers, etc. So they already use portals. They just don't use biodiversity portals. And I think this is something for us that manage biodiversity portals, and I'm one of them. So, and Tiago, thank you very much. Yes, this is a game, so kids have rewards and challenges, and no, most of our rewards in biodiversity portals are just look at pictures which are beautiful for some, for others not as much. So this is something that we should pursue definitely and test to see if it works. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now wrap up this session, and thank you very much, Professor Rosalina Gabriel, again for your presentation. It was very, very interesting. Thank you, Professor Paul Borges, for also being here and for participating and presenting Professor Rosalina Gabriel. Thank you, Mariana Marques, who is here with us in the backstage, ensuring that everything goes well in the connection with YouTube. And thank you all of you for being here present and participating in this session. We hope that you enjoyed, and we invite you to stay tuned and check all of our initiatives and check the next talks that we will have. So thank you once again, and we'll see you in the next Scientia meeting or in the next event that we have in the following week.